Hi everyone. This is not a video I had planned to bring out at this time. The background to it is that a bit over a year ago, a YouTuber calling himself Ethel Thurston with a YouTube channel called Essence of Thought published an extremely dishonest, defamatory video lying about me based on a blog post I'd written on my old blog, Skepticat UK, back in October 2009, having investigated the newly emerged English Defence League, which had been in existence just a few months. And I reported openly and honestly about it as a skeptic. That was the theme of my blog, Skeptical Inquiry. I reported in some detail what I found, and I advised people to steer clear of this group. However much I empathised with the anger at atrocities carried out by radical Islamist fundamentalists, an anger shared with most people, including, I believe, most British Muslims, and I suggested that people instead supported the One Law for All campaign and the Council of Ex-Muslims. Both of these were initiatives co-founded by my friend Mariam Namazi, a self-declared communist. I also supported activities organised by the British Council of Muslims for Secular Democracy, like this one, which was held at the end of October 2009, about 3 weeks after I'd written that blog about the EDL.
That a lot of non-Muslims and Muslims have come together, and
here I am holding a sign saying, "Debate those who insult Islam."
Piccadilly Circus, which is perhaps the first time when all peace-loving pro-democracy forces in this country have come together to challenge all those forces who are against freedom and who are against democracy.
Because debate, arguments, exchanges of opinions is what I am all about, but they are not what Thurston is about. When I invited him to have a live debate about what he said in his first video about me, he responded thus: "We don't debate fascists," which he posted from the safety of some 4,000 miles away. Thurston has always been a liar, a bully, and a coward, and in his latest video targeting me, which I will deal with in a moment, he has surpassed himself. So, in a video I made in response to his first one about me, I exposed the lies he said about the blog post I'd written. It wasn't hard, I was told. He then did another video responding to my response, but it wasn't worth the candle because he hadn't said anything new. He also accused me of lying about something incredibly trivial and stupid, like him not linking directly to my blog post in question, which he doesn't do. So I didn't bother watching his response because I didn't want to get into a silly back and forth. Bear in mind that, unlike Thurston, I don't censor critical comments. There is no point in leaving a comment beneath any video of his because he only allows comments that support him in his hate. If there was something I said in my video that he disagreed with or I'd got wrong, he could have posted below my video with his criticism or correction. He didn't even have the guts to do that, and I forgot all about him. Just to reiterate, I can't sue Thurston, and nor can any of the other people he defames, and there are a lot of them, because he apparently lives in India. If anyone ever hears of him returning to live in England, then please let me know, because recently I was alerted to the fact that he has decided to have another go at me by misrepresenting the assault on me that took place 5.5 years ago when I was waiting at Speaker's Corner to attend a debate of the proposed changes to our Gender Recognition Act. I am accused by members of the gender cult of dining out on that assault. I don't. I'd much rather move on from it, but they don't let it go. And I find it quite tiresome that people are still misrepresenting it after all this time. And I'm sure that those who are very familiar with the episode are tired of hearing about it. On the other hand, it gives me yet another opportunity to show how low members of this pernicious cult will go. The assault on me and the subsequent false narrative spread by the misogynists piqued countless people. I'm still meeting and hearing from people who state that it was that incident and the cult's behaviour afterwards and the judge's comments that served to wake them up to the horrors of gender ideology and those who promote it. Make no mistake, if people are going to lie about what happened to me, I'm going to expose them as the liars they are. But there is another reason that I'm taking this man to task, and that is his repeated use of the word fascist. In his latest video targeting me, he uses the word fascist or fascism over a dozen times to refer to those of us standing for women's rights and children's well-being against the entitlement of pervy men to access our spaces and our sports. Now, Thurston clearly doesn't know what a fascist is. He doesn't know what it's like to live under a fascist regime when your family are known opponents of it, to have family members imprisoned and tortured by that regime. I do. Here's one of my relatives it happened to, who happened to be quite famous at the time. There are many sources online that Thurston could have used to check out and learn what fascism is. If he'd bothered, he would have discovered that fascist regimes are characterized by authoritarianism, nationalism, militarism. They're not characterized by a commitment to free speech, biological truth, non-violence and defending women's rights. And they're not characterized by opposing patriarchal oppression, of which gender identity ideology is the most iniquitous form at present. Thurston is the personification of the white male privilege that patriarchal systems uphold. Fascists, as individuals, are typically intolerant of views they disagree with to the extent of actively trying to silence people who hold them, and they will use any means they can, from trying to destroy people's livelihoods. They will resort to abuse and intimidation, trying to drive people out of wherever they are, and they don't hold back from physical violence. These are all tactics used by the anti-women's rights activists of the gender cult. They are not used by any of us. And yet Thurston calls us fascists and people on his own side human rights protesters. This is, of course, a strategy that has been used by many fascists from the Third Reich to Golden Dawn, painting the target group as evil and as liars when, in fact, it is the fascists themselves who are evil and liars, and that is absolutely what Thurston is doing. He is quite unable to justify calling me or any of us who want to meet peacefully to talk about our concerns, our experiences and our lives, and who oppose allowing men to claim to be women and access our sex-based rights and protections, fascists. He does it because he is unable to argue coherently for his ideological position. While it may be that the gender identity movement is not nationalistic or militaristic, it is absolutely authoritarian, tyrannical and violent, and that is why I now choose to call them fascists. As a label, it fits them well enough. It doesn't fit us at all. So, to get to his latest video, he starts by once again attacking someone called Jill Bearup for an article she wrote just after I was assaulted, and he says this.
There is a narrative, a mythology constructed around said events by gender-critical fascists, including the infamous Jill Bearup, who frames that event as 4 transgender activists descended upon a sweet, innocent 6-year-old woman, Maria McLachlan, brutally mugging her. Wow, that sounds pretty bad. Just a shame it's a fucking lie. Not only did Bearup leave out McLachlan's open support for fellow fascist hate group, the English Defence League, with McLachlan asserting its image problem is simply the result of a few bad apples.
No, That's the effing lie. Obviously, he flashes my blog up with a couple of bits highlighted while claiming that I assert that the EDL has an image problem that is simply the result of a few bad apples, when, of course, I assert nothing of the kind, as anyone who stops the video and looks can see for themselves. And I make it absolutely clear that I do not support the EDL, even though at the time, a few months after they were created, there was nothing in their stated policy that could be described as fascist. As I said earlier, I advised people to steer clear of that particular group. Now, having covered all of this in my previous response to Thurston, I'm not going to revisit the whole thing. I will, of course, link to both the earlier video I did and the blog post in question. Next.
But Bearup also lied about the events in Hyde Park itself, namely the fact that McLachlan was pushed over as a result of her choking someone in a headlock, dragging them about 10 feet away from their group, before violently shaking them with the help of a friend.
Yep, he really said that, and now he's going to repeat it, and I'm going to expose what he says lie by lie. Here's the first one.
So let's roll things back to the very beginning. Stonewall pulls out of a debate against a group of gender-critical fascists when they realise just how bad faith the people they are going up against are, only for two venues, the main venue and the backup venue, to cancel on said fascists. As a result, both the anti-trans fascists, including McLachlan, and the human rights group who had turned up to protest them, moved to Hyde Park.
And now, the truth. A debate was organised by Venice Allen and another feminist who keeps a much lower profile. On the one side, opposing gender self-ID was radical feminist Julia Long and Miranda Yardley. This is the only picture I have of Miranda. It was a few weeks after the assault, and I'm putting him in a headlock. That is a joke directed at the idiots who claimed I'd put one of my assailants in a headlock. Miranda describes himself as transsexual, but not as a trans woman. He's one of those trans-identifying guys who I feel has genuine empathy for women. Neither Julia nor Miranda calls themselves gender critical. In fact, I have heard both explicitly reject the label, not that that's important. Oh, by the way, Miranda was the only one of the key players I'd even heard of before this debate was organised, and having been impressed by an article he'd written in the Morning Star newspaper, the communist newspaper on which I used to work myself and still read some of online, I was keen to hear what he had to say as a self-declared transsexual. The two people from Stonewall who'd initially agreed to take part pulled out, giving excuses about going on holiday or something. Neither said anything about realising their opponents were bad faith, and what does that even mean anyway? This is just like everything else, Thurston says. Pure fabrication. As is the bit about there being a backup venue and that it had cancelled together with the main venue. There was one original venue with no backup. That was the New Cross Learning Centre in South East London. I was really disappointed to learn that due to pressure from local gender fascists, it had cancelled the meeting for what it called safety concerns, otherwise known as threats of violence. But I was delighted that Venice Allen had managed to find an alternative venue in central London at very short notice. Gender fascist Kat Higgins spent a lot of time trying to find out the new venue, but failed. Miranda Yardley announced on Twitter that anyone wanting to go to the meeting should meet at Speaker's Corner at, I think it was 6:30 on Wednesday, 13 September 2017, and the address of the venue would be given out then. I went there on my own, not knowing a soul. It was my very first meeting on this topic, and I had no history at all of speaking about it or writing about it.
Once there, both groups kind of separated into their own little corners, chanting back and forth for one another, which is when we have video.
Actually, there is video before that. I wonder why Thurston doesn't show it. Here's a clip from the original video I made about the assault. Right, this is the very start of a video taken soon after I arrived at Speaker's Corner by Miranda Yardley, who was to be one of the speakers at the meeting we were waiting to go to. This would have been maybe 20 minutes, half an hour before I was assaulted. Let's zoom in. there I am doing what I spent the entire waiting period doing, which was standing around chatting to people I'd never met before. All of us were just waiting around till it was time to go to the venue. Right, this cheeky little face belongs to Vaughan Wilkinson, who exactly 6 months after I was assaulted testified in court against me in an attempt to get my violent assailant acquitted.
You're doing this to a transsexual. You're doing this to a transsexual. That is amazing. You're silencing a transsexual.
I'm not silencing you.
Transmisogyny is a made-up word.
The only one who engaged to any extent with the gender fascists was Miranda Yardley. Vaughan Wilkinson was getting in Miranda's face as Miranda was filming the scene. She then followed him out of the park together with Laurel Uziel, who also lied in court in defence of the woman beater Tara Wolff. And as Miranda was filming, one of the men who, a short while later, assaulted me, tried to snatch Miranda's phone.
So what are you going to do with that footage?
No, it's pretty nice footage. Happy stuff, all good.
All of this was going on while I was supposedly getting in people's faces filming them. This is what those two liars, Uziel and Wilkinson, and two other liars, Kat Higgins and Ananya Jayadev, testified under oath in court. And although there was no evidence whatsoever that I had done any such thing, not a single person got footage of it, funnily enough, still the judge chose to believe them. Obviously, it's not the first time in history that a male judge had sympathised with a male defendant more than his female victim. Back to my original film. Thurston claims there was chanting back and forth between both groups. There was no chanting from either side initially. Right, this is a little bit later. Miranda has now gone, and the trans activists have come back into the park and joined their comrades, and they're all standing several metres behind me. My camera, which had stayed in my bag the entire time up to this point, is now poised and ready to film Julia Long, who had got hold of a megaphone from the organiser because she wanted to sing us a song. But just at the moment she put that megaphone to her lips, the trans activists started yelling loudly. Presumably they thought she was going to make a speech, and of course they had to shout and drown out her voice, because drowning out voices they disagree with is what they're all about.
As people are chanting at one another, McLachlan peels off from her group and begins approaching the human rights protesters, recording them as she does. In response, a trans woman, Tara Wolff, breaks off from the human rights group and attempts to slap the camera out of McLachlan's hand, failing to do so before Tara retreats behind her group.
Gotta love the way he calls these people who basically tried to prevent our meeting from happening at all, were now shouting at us, and one of them runs out and tries to vandalise my camera, the human rights group. That's how human rights activists behave in Thurston's sick fascist mind, apparently.
McLachlan then decides it would be a great idea to continue to approach the other group, pushing her camera mere inches from people's faces, whilst being told to stop and back off. One individual even raises their cardboard sign to block McLachlan, who at that point is barging her way into the group.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Here's the initial assault from a better angle. As you can see, Wolff runs behind his mates. I follow his movement with my camera, raise it above their heads, blocked, and retreat and attacked. Of course, going after Wolff with my camera wasn't a great idea. It was a knee-jerk reaction born of shock, utterly stupid, and of course I wouldn't have done it if I'd been in my right mind and given a nanosecond's thought to it. That's not something I expect Thurston or anyone else who has lost touch with whatever humanity they might once have had to understand. And nobody was telling me to stop. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I think those young women Wolff tried to hide behind were almost as shocked as I was. What I did was raise my camera above their heads to get footage of Wolff. Someone blocked my camera with their placard, and I think that was the moment I came to my senses, realised it was hopeless, and retreated.
The group responds by trying to push her and her camera away, which breaks out into a scuffle, with the anti-trans group rushing forward to join in.
A scuffle? No, it was 3 young men attacking me. One of them was this guy, Tara Wolfe, who is over 6 feet tall. In this photo are his 2 accomplices. He has his back to us. Note their height and their youth. I was 60 years old at the time and about 165 centimetres tall. That's about 5'4" or 5. And no, nobody rushed forward to join in. Women from both sides rushed forward, as Thurston undoubtedly saw for himself it's not hard, and to be fair, even those on the other side were trying to help me. This young woman was trying to get one of my assailants off of me.
The scuffle lasts mere seconds, yet in the chaos, nobody notices McLachlan grab one of the trans people in a headlock before she begins dragging them back towards the anti-trans side.
Imagine that. I am surrounded, yet somehow I managed to put this 6-foot-tall, 25-year-old man in a headlock and drag him away from his mates. He seriously expects people to believe that, and some of them probably do, because if you believe a man can be a woman or vice versa, you'll believe anything, right?
Whereupon her and one of her friends begin violently shaking this random trans person.
Really? Okay, let's see what actually happened. Wolf comes up and thumps me and runs away like the big old sissy he is. Initially, some people thought I was being attacked by 4 trans activists, but this is actually feminist hero Helen Steele, who on seeing what was happening to me gave no thought to her own safety, but instinctively put her arms around me to try to protect me. I wasn't sure what was happening, except that this guy was trying to steal my camera, and I was desperately trying to hold on to it. L. Higgins and Jayadov are watching Ponytail Man, who's distracted from helping his mate attack me, and turns to attack the woman on his own side. Meanwhile, on the right, you see his mate's body bent over as he's pulling with all his might to get my camera, which is still looped around my wrist while I'm trying to hold onto my property and stop him running away with it. Finally, he got my camera from me and he smashes it. Want to see that again, even slower? I'll zoom in so you can see the camera in his hand, zoom out, and you can see it hit the ground. I knew the camera hadn't gone far, and here you see me still holding on to him for dear life to stop him picking it up and running off with it. Just after this guy has finally got my camera out of my right hand and smashed it, there's a couple of seconds where I've got my left arm round the front of his chest at the top. Joss Pryor made a still from the footage and called it a loose headlock, which is nonsense, of course. The point of a headlock is to lock the head so it can't move, and this guy, as Magdalene Burns, bless her, said, seems to think he's in a mosh pit. Of course, as trans activists are mostly evil as well as morons, they took the headlock meme and ran with it. Funny that Thurston misses the bit about the camera smashing out, isn't it? I mean, what makes more sense? That I, in a state of shock and poor judgment, decide to try and stop this young man stealing my camera when, for my own safety, I should have just let him have it, or that I was big and strong enough to overpower him, put him in a headlock and drag him several meters and violently shake him. Even if I was capable, why would I do that? What purpose would it serve apart from provoking more violence against me? Okay, let's have a look at this alleged friend who I didn't know any better than anyone else there. In other words, not at all. This so-called friend and I violently shaking this thug. As you can see, I am holding onto him and he is thrashing around trying to get loose. I don't even know what the other woman is doing, but she's hardly touching him. I remember pulling his hood back, hoping someone would get footage of his face. But if you think I am violently shaking this bloke, then you're an idiot. I'm holding on to his clothes. Even the judge, who wasn't on my side, rejected the nonsense about me getting him in a headlock and thrashing him up and down. And here comes Tara Wolf, who thumps me. Goodness knows how I managed to keep holding on to his mate. And then comes the other guy who punches me, and I end up on the ground, and the cowards run off. The human rights protester doesn't want his face to be seen. I wonder why. For those who don't know, only Tara Wolf was ever caught. He was identified, caught, arrested and charged and convicted of battery. The other two, to this day, I don't know who they are. I would stop here, but there's just one more bit out of his whole demented narrative that is so unhinged. I just have to show it. First, his intro.
Both sides separate and things quieten down once more. Now, there's a few things of interest I'd like to point out here, things that aren't noticeable in the video but rather the audio. The first is members of the anti-trans group laughing as everything happens, talking nonchalantly about recording things as Venice Allen, the woman in the red coat who organised the event, yells, "Hit him."
So he's primed you for what he wants you to hear. I was reminded of the Peter Kay routine about misheard lyrics.
You know that song, We Are Family? For years I thought they were singing, "Just let me staple the vicar."
All of the people around us, they say, can they be that close? Just let me stay for the record.
And he does that with a whole series of songs. It's pretty funny. Once you've heard Peter Kay's alternative lyrics, you can't unhear them. So now we supposedly have Venice Allen shouting, "Hit him." We'll start from the time the two men have grabbed me. I'll stop the footage just after the supposed shout in question, and I'll replay it a few times, but however many times you'll listen to it, you will not hear the words "hit him" because nobody says it. But Thurston is so committed to promoting this falsehood that he's even edited the automated transcript. As for the, what was it?
The first is members of the anti-trans group laughing as everything happens, talking nonchalantly about recording things as...
Yeah, keep filming.
Again, that's it. We hear someone say filming and give a bit of a snigger. We don't know who they were, what they were saying, or whether they had seen anything. The action by this time is hidden by the group surrounding me, but Thurston is trying to give the impression that they were talking nonchalantly and laughing while I was being assaulted, when in fact those who had witnessed anything were surrounding me trying to help me. He went on to make nasty comments claiming Venice didn't care and started walking away while I was still on the ground. But she saw I had women helping me and she was saying, "Call the police."
No. Call the police.
In case anyone is wondering what the hell Thurston was trying to achieve with this video.
Everybody's expendable under fascism, yet nobody following it thinks that refers to them specifically. It's one of those really twisted elements to the whole thing. And it's both of these things, the language and the way Venice Allen reacts, that reveal what this entire show had been about. The anti-trans elements were setting out to provoke a response so that they could then turn around and use it to reinforce their anti-trans propaganda. In a domestic setting, this is something known as reactive abuse, where the abuser provokes their victim into reacting violently, allowing them to flip the abuser-victim narrative.
So there you have it. An older, naive woman whom nobody on either side had ever heard of before filmed a protest in a public space that was famous for free speech and the right to protest in order to provoke violence against me. I then turned into the bionic woman and got a random young man in a headlock, dragged him off and shook him violently. Too late, Thurston. The fact that I was assaulted by violent male Thugs LARPing as women is established history. Mention of it appears in every damn book I pick up and read about genderism, and Thurston's fantasy version just illustrates that he's a vicious, hateful, and probably psychotic individual. I expect he'll do a response video doubling down on his shit. I don't care. I won't be watching it. Let him stew in his own poison, because at the end of the day, he condemns himself and the rest of his cult with his own mouth. So, thanks for the ammo. That's all. Thanks for watching. Bye.